Detroit Metropolitan Airport, the last day of July 1972. A man walks toward Gate 15 wearing a black suit and a white clerical collar. He is carrying a Bible. He moves the way clergymen move in airports, unhurried, polite, a small nod for anyone who catches his eye. The ticket in his hand says, Reverend L. Burgess. The woman at the counter smiles at him. Of course she does. In 1972, there are no metal detectors at American gates, no X-ray belts, no shoes in a plastic tray. You show a ticket and you walk onto the plane. And when the man walking onto the plane is a priest, nobody looks twice at what he's holding. Inside that Bible, the pages have been cut out. In the hollow where the scripture used to be, there is a loaded pistol. The man in the collar is not a reverend. He is not L. Burgess. He is a 29-year-old escaped convict from New Jersey, serving 15 to 30 years for the killing of a gas station owner, and he has been a free man for 2 years because he climbed out of a prison and never looked back. In the next 6 hours, he is going to take a Boeing 727 and every soul on it. He's going to make the FBI count out $1 million in cash. He's going to make the agents who deliver it take off their clothes on an airport runway. And then he's going to disappear so completely that the United States government won't find him again for 41 years. 5 other people helped him do it. Every single one of them went to prison. He never did. You've probably heard the ending of this story. The old man in the beach town near Lisbon. The wife who didn't know. The children who found out from a newspaper. This isn't that story. This is the story of the day itself. The plan. The 4 hours on a runway in Miami. The 2 women, the 2 men, and the 3 small children who were part of it. Because that detail gets left out every time, and it shouldn't. Because it's the reason the whole thing worked. And it's the story of a man named Walter Patterson, who died 10 years before that plane ever left the ground, and who is the only person in this entire history that nobody ever wrote a book about. Let's go back. Wall Township, New Jersey, November 1962. It is a stretch of highway with a gas station on it, the kind with 2 pumps out front and a single light over the office door. The man who owns it is Walter Patterson. He is in his 40s. He fought in the Second World War and came home and did what a lot of men who came home did. He bought a small business and worked it himself, most days, most hours. On this night, 3 young men come to the station. One of them is 20 years old. He was born in Halifax County, North Carolina, and his name is George Wright. What happens next takes less than a few minutes. There is a robbery. There is a struggle. Walter Patterson is shot with his own gun, and he does not survive it. Walter Patterson was not a gangster. He wasn't a rival. He wasn't part of any world where this was the risk you accepted. He was a man who owned 2 gas pumps on a state highway in New Jersey. He was killed for whatever was in a register on a Friday night. And in every telling of what came after, the hijacking, the ransom, the international manhunt, the beach town in Portugal, the newspapers, the documentaries, the arguments about extradition, Walter Patterson is one sentence, sometimes half of one. Wright is arrested. He goes to court. He does not fight the murder charge. He enters a plea, and a judge hands him 15 to 30 years. He goes into the New Jersey state prison system, and by every reasonable expectation of 1962, that is the end of George Wright's public life. He is 20 years old, and he will be an old man when he comes out, if he comes out. 8 years pass. August 1970. Wright is being held at Bayside State Prison in Leesburg, New Jersey. Leesburg is a farm prison. That matters. It isn't a fortress with gun towers and a wall you'd need a helicopter to clear. It's a working agricultural facility, minimum and medium custody, where men are outside during the day with tools in their hands and fields around them. Wright walks off. That's the whole escape. No tunnel, no hostage, no rope or bed sheets. A man in a field who chose a direction and kept going. There's a lesson in that, which prison administrators learned very slowly across the 60s and 70s. The hardest man to hold is not the one who fights the wall. It's the one who's already been told he's trusted enough to stand next to a gap in it. Now he's a fugitive with an open murder conviction, and he has to become somebody else. He goes underground, and he surfaces in Detroit, inside a circle of people connected to the Black Liberation Army, a splintered, hunted network that broke off from the Black Panther Party as the Panthers came apart under federal pressure. By 1972, the BLA is a handful of small cells, most of them being pursued by the FBI, most of them arguing among themselves about what to do next. I want to be precise about something because this story gets flattened in both directions. Some tellings turn right into a revolutionary and forget the gas station entirely. Others treat the politics as pure costume. The truth is less clean. He was a man with a murder conviction and no legal future in the United States, standing inside a movement that had a language for exile, and exile was exactly the product he needed. In 1972, if you were a black radical fugitive in America, there was one country that had publicly taken people like you in and not sent them back: Algeria. Eldridge Cleaver had set up an international section of the Panthers in Algiers. Other hijackers had already flown planes there. The Algerian government had let them stay. So the question inside that Detroit circle isn't really whether to leave. It's how you get a jet. 6 people board Delta Airlines Flight 841 on the 31st of July, 1972, with a plan. 3 of them are children. George Wright, 29, escaped murder convict in the clerical collar carrying the Bible. George Brown, another man from the same circle. Melvin McNair, a young man from North Carolina who had been in the Army and walked away from it, a former ball player, the kind of kid who'd been the pride of a small town before everything went sideways. Jean McNair, his wife. Joyce Tillerson, a young woman traveling with them. And the children, small children, one of them an infant. I need you to sit with that for a moment because it's the part that gets sanded off this story every time it's retold as an adventure. This was not 6 armed adults executing a military operation. This was 2 couples and a friend carrying babies through an airport as cover because a family with a crying baby is invisible in 1972, and a priest is invisible in 1972, and invisible is the entire technology of the plan. There was no bomb, no team of gunmen. The plan was made out of assumptions. The assumption that nobody searches for a man of God. The assumption that nobody suspects a mother holding an infant. The assumption that American aviation in 1972 had no idea what was walking onto its aircraft, which was, unfortunately, completely correct. Because here's the thing, people forget about that year. In the early 1970s, planes were being hijacked in the United States at a rate that today would read like fiction. Dozens per year, some for money, some for Cuba, some by people in genuine crisis. It happened so often that airlines had internal procedures for it, and pilots had personal opinions about how to handle it. The country hadn't yet decided this was intolerable. That decision came later, and this flight is one of the reasons. Flight 841 lifts off from Detroit, bound for Miami. A Boeing 727, 101 souls aboard, an ordinary Monday evening in the air. Then a man in a clerical collar stands up. What follows is the part of this story that survives in the FBI's own files and in the accounts of the crew, and it is genuinely one of the strangest afternoons in American aviation. The Bible opens, the gun comes out, the cockpit door is reached, and the crew is told the aircraft no longer belongs to them. The demand is a number, $1 million, in 1972 dollars. Understand what that is. That is generational money. That is more than most Americans alive that day would earn in their entire working lives, sitting in a canvas bag on a runway. The plane lands in Miami, and now the negotiation starts, and this is where it stops sounding like a movie and starts sounding like real people improvising under enormous pressure. Passengers are released in Miami, and that matters, factually and morally, whatever else you think of what these people did. 100 civilians walk off that aircraft onto the tarmac and go home to their families. The hijackers keep the crew. Then comes the money. Delta assembles it, the FBI brings it, and Wright adds a condition that nobody in the Bureau has heard before. The agents delivering the cash have to strip to their underwear. Not a search, not a pat down. Strip on the runway in front of the aircraft and walk the money over with nothing hidden anywhere on them. Think about why. He is not doing it to humiliate anyone. He is doing it because he has calculated correctly that the single greatest danger to him in the next 10 minutes is a federal agent with a weapon concealed under a jacket, standing 3 feet away at the moment of the handover, the moment when hijackings historically ended in gunfire. He removes the jacket from the equation. He removes everything from the equation, and the FBI does it. Federal agents of the United States government in their underwear on a Miami runway carrying $1 million in cash to a man in a priest's collar because he asked. That image is why this case is taught. Not because it was violent. Remarkably, nobody on that plane is killed, but because it exposed, in one afternoon, exactly how much leverage one man with a hidden pistol had over the entire apparatus of American air travel. The money is aboard. Now they need to leave the continent, and a 727 flying the Atlantic needs a flight crew qualified for it. So the plane goes north to Boston, where an international navigator comes aboard and the aircraft is prepared for an ocean crossing. And then Flight 841 turns east and flies away from the United States of America with $1 million and 6 hijackers and 3 children on it. Next stop, Algiers. They land in Algeria believing they have arrived. Sanctuary. A government that has publicly welcomed Black American radicals, a Panther office in the capital, a whole political architecture designed for exactly this arrival. What they discover is that governments are not political movements. Algeria takes the plane. Algeria takes the crew's safety seriously, and the aircraft is returned. And Algeria takes the $1 million and gives it back to the United States. Every dollar. The entire reason for the operation, handed across a diplomatic table within days. Whatever Algiers wanted from Washington that season, it was worth more than a bag of Delta's cash and the goodwill of 6 exiles. So the hijackers are alive, they are free, they are on the other side of the world, and they are broke. The plan worked perfectly and delivered nothing. What comes next is drift. The Algerian welcome cools as the Panther presence there collapses. The group scatters into Europe with false names and no money and small children who need school and doctors and normal lives. They end up in France. And France is where the bill finally comes due for 5 of them. In 1976, French police close in. Melvin McNair, Jean McNair, George Brown, and Joyce Tillerson are taken into custody in France. What happens in the French courts is one of the strangest legal outcomes of the era. The United States wants them. France tries them instead for the hijacking on French terms, and French public opinion turns out to be extraordinarily sympathetic. Lawyers, writers, and a slice of the intellectual left take up their case, framing them not as air pirates, but as products of American racism who ran because there was nowhere in their own country to stand. They receive sentences measured in a small number of years, not decades. They serve them. And then, remarkably, France does not send them to America. Melvin McNair stays in Normandy. He spends the rest of his working life in the city of Caen, doing youth work and coaching American football and baseball with French teenagers decade after decade in a country he never planned to live in, speaking a language he had to learn in his 30s. He becomes, in the most literal sense, a local institution. He writes about what he did. He talks to journalists about the weight of it. That is the actual afterlife of Flight 841 for the people who were caught. Not glory, not martyrdom. A few years in a French prison, and then 40 years of ordinary work in a foreign town, with the thing you did in 1972 sitting in the room every single day. And one man was not in that courtroom. George Wright was not swept up in France. He crossed into Portugal. And there, and this is the part your regulars already know, so we will take it fast, he became somebody else completely. A Portuguese name, José Luís Jorge dos Santos. A Portuguese wife, 2 Portuguese children, Portuguese citizenship granted by a state that had no idea what it was signing. A house near the coast west of Lisbon. Neighbors who knew him as a quiet, friendly man who had lived there so long he was simply part of the street. For 30-plus years, nothing. No arrest, no tip, no near miss. Then, in 2011, a cold case review in the United States pulls the old New Jersey fugitive file back into daylight, fingerprints get compared against foreign records, and a print taken decades earlier for a routine Portuguese identity document matches a 20-year-old from Halifax County, North Carolina. September 2011. Portuguese police come up the street and arrest the neighbor everyone called Jose. He is 68 years old. He has been gone for 41 years. The United States asks for him back, and Portugal says no. Portuguese courts rule against the extradition. He is a Portuguese citizen. He has decades of settled life there, and under the way Portuguese law measures the passage of time, the American claim on him no longer holds. Appeals fail. Washington does not get him. He walks back out into the sunshine. So let's total this up, because that's the reason to tell it from this end. One man planned an aircraft hijacking, executed it in a priest's collar with a gun in a hollowed-out Bible, made the FBI strip to their underwear on a runway, and lived out his life as a free citizen of a European country. 4 of his co-defendants served a handful of years in France and spent the rest of their lives in exile, coaching other people's children in a language they learned as adults. 101 passengers went home safe, which is the single best fact in this entire story. And Walter Patterson, a veteran who owned a gas station on a state highway in New Jersey, who never boarded a plane in this story, who was killed in 1962 for the contents of a cash register, got no book, no documentary, no French intellectuals arguing his case, and no headline in 2011 with his name in it. 41 years is a long time to be missing. 60-plus years is longer to be forgotten. If you want the other half of this, the beach town, the wife who didn't know, the children who found out from a newspaper, that story's on the channel. Tell me in the comments, was Portugal right to keep him? And if you're new here, this channel goes into the cases the documentaries skip, so stick around.